He used to draw detailed maps of a town that doesn't exist. When we looked it up, we found something. I taught 6th grade social studies for almost 15 years before I ever met a kid like Mason. I've had quirky ones, troubled ones, and ones too smart for their own good. But Mason was something else. He joined my class in the fall of 2012. Quiet, polite, with these big pale blue eyes that never quite blinked when they should. His mom said he was shy, homeschooled until that year, and very into drawing. That was her word for it. Drawing. What I didn't realize until later is that she wasn't exaggerating. Mason didn't just doodle, he created. From the very first day, he sat alone, never causing trouble, never speaking unless called on. But every spare moment, recess, lunch, even silent reading, he was filling these oversized sketchbooks with charcoal drawings. And not random shapes or cartoons like the other kids. He drew maps, pages and pages of what looked like hand-drawn blueprints for a town, maybe even a small city. Street layouts, names of buildings, sewer lines, traffic patterns, and the detail, I mean, it was disturbing. I once picked up a page he'd left behind and just stared at it. The label said August 8, 1965, North Sector Evacuation Route. It had little arrows leading out of a neighborhood he'd called Ryehurst. Everything was shaded in, including fire hydrants and old cars. That would have been strange enough. But Mason kept going. He filled 7 full sketchbooks by November. All of them organized, numbered, labeled like a professional was compiling urban development plans. I asked him one day where he learned to draw like that. He looked at me, expressionless, and said, "I remember it." I laughed a little, thinking he was being dramatic. "Remember what?" I asked. "The town. Before it changed. I figured it was a game. Maybe something from a book or video game. But no one else in the class was playing it. And when I asked him more, he clammed up. "I'm not supposed to talk about it," he said. We had a parent-teacher conference 2 weeks later. His mom, Dana, was tired, like bone-deep tired, and she looked older than she should have. I asked about the maps. She sighed and said, "Oh, that's just his thing. He's been drawing that town since he was 3. Always the same streets, the same names. Ryehurst. We don't know where it comes from." I pressed a little, gently, and she admitted something strange. "My husband and I tried to find it once. When he was 5, he kept asking to go back. So we thought maybe it was something from a past vacation. We drove all over New England. Nothing. No Ryehurst anywhere." She smiled weakly. We stopped asking after a while. That conversation stuck with me. Not because I thought anything supernatural was happening, but because of how certain Mason was. His maps never contradicted each other. Over weeks, months, the town expanded in a way that made sense, like he was documenting something he knew intimately. In January, Mason turned in a project that creeped me out more than I want to admit. It was supposed to be a report on a real historical disaster, something like the Dust Bowl or the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. Instead, he handed in a report titled The Ryehurst Sirens, August 8, 1965. It was 10 pages, typed, complete with hand-drawn diagrams of emergency exits, radio towers, and a water treatment facility. He described, in chilling detail, a siren that failed to activate before a flood. 42 people were never found, he wrote. The tunnels collapsed before they could reach the north side. There were names of the missing, quotes from supposed newspaper clippings, diagrams of rescue efforts. I asked him, again, where he got the information. He said, "I was there. I told the principal, not because I thought he was a danger, but because I didn't know how to help a kid that convinced." Our school psychologist did a session with him. Said he was smart, possibly somewhere on the spectrum. But not delusional. Imaginative, she said. Brilliant, even, but grounded. A week later, Mason stopped drawing. Cold turkey. No sketchbook. No scribbles. Nothing. He looked pale and started flinching when loud bells rang. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Then one day in early March, he came to my desk after class, looked me dead in the face, and whispered, "They're coming down soon." The buildings. I saw the signs again. I asked what signs. He just left the room. That weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Ryehurst. I looked it up for the 100th time. Nothing. But then I tried something different. I pulled up historical topography maps from Massachusetts and surrounding areas, filtered by year, 1960 to 1970. In a county I'd never heard of, Hampner County, I found a decommissioned town site marked R112, restricted access. No name, just coordinates. Curious, I traced it against a satellite map. There were roads, barely visible, curling into a forested area. And then, I zoomed in. One of the road names, faint and almost erased by the overlay, said, North Sector Route 8. My stomach dropped. I'd seen that name. It was on the evacuation map Mason drew in September. The exact same label. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day at school, Mason was absent. And the next. And the next. I called his home. Disconnected. I went to the address on file. Empty house. For sale sign. No forwarding address. And Mason, that strange, quiet kid with the haunted eyes and the town in his head, was never enrolled in any other school in the district. We checked. The only thing left behind was one sketchbook the janitor found in the lost and found. The cover said, Final entry, demolition approved. Inside were only 2 pages. Page 1, a drawing of a building I'd never seen before, labeled Central Office. In front of it stood a group of people with no faces. Page 2, a note in his tiny, perfect handwriting. Don't go looking. What's buried should stay buried. But thank you for listening. I kept that notebook. I don't show it to anyone. But sometimes, when I can't sleep, I flip through it. And I wonder if somewhere out there, buried under moss and time, a town called Ryehurst still remembers a little boy who never really left. And whether he was ever really here. I wasn't proud of what I did next. I told myself it was about closure. That I just wanted to understand what happened to him. But if I'm being honest, it was obsession. Pure and simple. I couldn't stop thinking about that kid, about the look in his eyes. The certainty in his voice. Something about the way he said they're coming down soon haunted me more than it should have. Like it wasn't just a story to him. Like it was a warning. I took a personal day that Friday, printed out the coordinates I'd found, and drove up to Hampner County. It was 4.5 hours from where I lived, through a mess of frost-covered highways and long-forgotten backroads. The last half hour of the drive was on unpaved gravel, the kind where you second-guess whether you should keep going. My GPS died about 15 minutes in. Just froze on a blank screen and wouldn't reset. I used the printed map after that. There wasn't much out there. A few gutted trailers, miles of skeletal trees, and a smell in the air like wet copper. I passed a rusted-out gas station with a collapsed awning. No signs, no people, no birds. Just dead silence and that sense, you know the one, like the woods are watching you back. Then I saw it. At the end of the road was a gate. Not a modern one. But old, tall wrought iron bars, twisted at the top like someone had tried to pry them apart. A rusted sign hung sideways from the chain. Property of Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Entry prohibited. The fence stretched left and right into the woods like it had been there forever. I should have turned around. I really should have. But I'd come this far. I parked the car in the ditch and climbed over. The ground on the other side felt soft. Not muddy, exactly, but unstable. Like the roots weren't holding things together the way they should. About 10 minutes in, I started seeing it. The remains. A cracked sidewalk, running parallel to nothing. A set of concrete stairs leading to air. A rusted-out tricycle wedged in the roots of a tree. Further in, there was a fire hydrant tipped on its side, covered in vines. A parking meter. A pair of lampposts, bent and broken, like someone had tried to push them down. But what stopped me cold was a crumbled sign on the ground. Ryehurst Public Library. It was real. I just stood there, staring, not breathing, not thinking. I must have looked like an idiot. A grown man in a school parka, hands shaking over some cracked concrete letters. But you have to understand, I'd seen that sign before. In Mason's sketches. It was the exact same font. The same border design. Same chipped corner. That wasn't coincidence. This place, this town, had existed. Somehow, nobody talked about it anymore. Somehow it had been erased. I went deeper. Through trees and what looked like collapsed roofs. I followed a narrow path lined with old metal stakes, and then I saw the tunnel. It was half buried in the hillside. Bricks crumbled around the arch. A rusted chain-link gate sealed the mouth shut, but it was so degraded I could see through it. Inside, the tunnel curved down into the darkness. There were words above the arch. Barely legible through moss. North Sector Access Point 8. I sat down. Right there on the ground. I remembered what he'd written in the report. The tunnels collapsed before they could reach the north side. This was it. This was the tunnel Mason had drawn dozens of times. I remembered the tiny arrows, the evacuation routes, the circles around entry points. But there were no emergency signs now. No rescue efforts. No monuments. Just rot. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe more. But then I heard it. A soft, metallic ping. Then another. Like something tapping on metal. From inside the tunnel, I froze. I wasn't sure if it was an animal, maybe something shifting deeper inside. I told myself it was a pipe collapsing. Echoes. Anything. But then something scraped against the gate. Something slow. I didn't wait. I ran. I ran like hell through the brush, stumbled, fell, skinned my knees. I jumped the fence so fast I landed on my side. Crawled into the car and peeled off so hard I almost ripped the tires on the gravel. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. That night, I had dreams. Not of what I saw, but of what I almost did, the urge to go in. To crawl into the tunnel. To see what was at the end. But more than anything, I kept seeing Mason. Sitting in my classroom, charcoal on his fingers, drawing lines he already knew by heart. He said he remembered it. He said he was there. And I don't know if he meant in a dream. Or in another life. Or something else entirely. But I believe him now. Whatever Rhyhurst was, or is, it didn't want to be forgotten. It just wanted to be left alone. But someone opened the door. And now I'm not sure it ever closed again. I didn't talk about what I saw for a long time. Not to my colleagues, not to my wife, not even to myself. I boxed it up, mentally and physically, shoved the map printouts, the sketchbook, and that photo I snapped of the tunnel behind a stack of old yearbooks in my basement. Out of sight, out of mind. I even deleted the GPS coordinates from my phone. But you don't really forget something like that. Not when you've walked through a town that no longer exists. Not when a 12-year-old kid predicted the exact street name of a collapsed access tunnel no one's spoken about since the Johnson administration. I tried to get back to normal. It worked, for a while. A new school year started. New kids, new problems. I buried myself in work, told myself I'd imagined most of it. Until I met Ellie. She was one of my 7th grade homeroom students that fall. Bright kid, talkative, a little too sharp for her age. The kind who made sarcastic jokes that adults laughed at but other kids didn't quite understand. I liked her immediately. She reminded me of the kids who grew up too fast because they had to. One Monday in October, she brought in a sketchbook. At first I didn't think anything of it. Kids bring stuff to class all the time, comics, manga, art projects. But then I saw what she was drawing. It wasn't identical to Mason's style, but the structure was there. Topographical layouts, street names, labeled buildings. This one had a page titled South Quarter Emergency Exit Number 2. My blood went cold. I asked to see more. She hesitated, said, "You'll think it's weird." "I won't," I promised. She handed it over. The drawings were newer, cruder in some ways, but unmistakably similar. A grid-style town, blocky buildings, roads with familiar names, Pinevale, Sutro, Drummer Lane. The same names Mason had written. I flipped further in. There was a page with what looked like a playground. A slide, a couple of swing sets. In the corner, she'd drawn a child sitting alone, circled in red ink. The caption underneath, "This is where they find me." I looked up. "Ellie, where is this?" She shrugged. "Nowhere. It's just a place I dream about." I felt my hands shake. "What do you mean, find you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She shrugged again. "I don't know. I don't always remember. But there's this siren sometimes. Really loud. And the ground gets soft. Like it's going to swallow me." I couldn't breathe. She added, "It's always the same town. Even when I try not to go back." The rest of that day passed in a fog. I stared at the whiteboard through most of my afternoon classes. That night I dug out Mason's notebook from the basement, flipped through the pages until my fingers were raw. The names matched. The layouts matched. The dates didn't. Ellie had written dates on some of the pages. All of them were in the future. June 18, 2025, partial collapse, South Quarter exit. October 9, 2026, siren malfunction, playground sector. January 2, 2027, relocation notice. It didn't make sense. These weren't memories. They were predictions? I called the school counselor. Asked casually about Ellie's home life. She said everything seemed fine, no abuse, no trauma, 2 working parents. Honestly, she told me, she's one of the well-adjusted ones. A little too imaginative maybe. I wanted to believe that. But I couldn't ignore the patterns. The echoes. It was like Mason all over again. And the worst part was, she'd never met him. I checked the records. Mason had left in 2013. Ellie was born in 2011. She would have been too. They had no overlap, no connection, no explanation. Unless Rhyhurst wasn't just a place from the past. Unless it was something else. A pattern, a cycle, maybe even a memory that didn't belong to just one person. I started looking for more. I scoured old forums, scanned archives, hunted for news of towns that were flooded, relocated, condemned. Nothing official ever used the word Rhyhurst, but every now and then I'd find a strange note buried in comment sections, phrases like, "My uncle said there was a town that got sealed off in the 60s. People got sick, said they heard noises from underground. Anyone else dream of a tunnel that curves left? I don't know how I know that, but I do. Why do so many people remember a library on Drummer Lane? It doesn't exist. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to keep me up at night. Enough to make me realize this wasn't just about one kid. Or even two. It was something bigger. Something that had found its way into multiple minds, across years, through drawings and dreams. Something no one talks about. And no one can forget. I started documenting everything. It was the only way to stay sane. Every date, every detail, every strange phrase that showed up in the margins of Ellie's sketchbook or in the back of some forgotten internet thread, I recorded it all. I built a file, printed pages, drew comparisons between Mason and Ellie. Not because I thought I'd do anything with it, but because the pattern felt undeniable. If I stopped organizing it, I thought it might consume me. For a long time, I convinced myself that was enough, keeping the information in check, containing it. But then, in late March, Ellie stopped coming to school. No warning, no absence call, just gone. After 3 days, I asked the front office. They said her parents had withdrawn her from the district. Said they were moving, no forwarding address. It was happening again. I started calling numbers, her emergency contacts, all of them disconnected. Then her school email bounced. Even her class portal account disappeared, like someone wiped it manually. I went back to the only clue I had, her drawings. I still had copies I'd made when she left one sketchbook behind. In one, she'd drawn a house. Not a cartoon version, a fully realized rendering of a 2-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a slanted porch. I stared at it for hours until I realized something. It looked familiar, too familiar. I pulled up my old photo archives and found it. Mason had drawn the same house. Same warped porch, same angle, same cracked 2nd-story window. He'd labeled it, Hollow House, Do Not Enter. Ellie had written under hers, This is where they sleep. I don't know how long I sat there. Time didn't move right when I was going through their notebooks. I started forgetting meals. I barely responded to texts. My wife asked if I was depressed. I told her I was tired. I didn't want to tell her the truth, because even I didn't understand it anymore. A few nights later, I got an email. No subject, no sender, just one sentence. You're drawing it too now, aren't you? I didn't respond. I didn't even breathe. The next day, I woke up to a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a cassette tape, dusty and unmarked, and a folded note in handwriting I didn't recognize. It read, North Tunnel, 2nd turn. Play it when you're there. That broke me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I knew exactly where the tunnel was. I'd been there. I'd stood at its rusted mouth. And now someone was sending me instructions. Like I was part of it. I didn't sleep that night. Just paced the kitchen floor, holding that tape, wondering if I was being watched. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I called in sick, got in the car, took the exact route from months earlier. This time, I brought a flashlight, gloves, and a small tape recorder that could still play cassettes. The gate was still there. The sign was more rusted than before. The fence had more gaps in it now, like someone had been pulling at it. Or maybe something else had. I followed the same path into the woods, everything more overgrown, the trees more skeletal, like winter had never fully left. I kept going until I saw it. The tunnel, still half buried, but now the gate was open. Not broken, open, swung to the side, like someone had been waiting for me. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to turn around. But my hand gripped the recorder so tight it hurt. I stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Heavy, wet, like the kind of cold you feel in your teeth. I followed the curve of the tunnel, counting my steps. 10, 20, 32. Then the 2nd turn. A sharp left. The brickwork here was crumbling, the floor soft beneath my shoes. I stopped, pulled the recorder from my bag, slotted the tape in, hit play. Nothing at first, just static. Then, voices. Distant, echoing, children, laughing. Then a siren, long, mechanical, muffled like it was coming from underwater. And then, a voice. Masons, don't go past the 3rd turn. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. The tape cut out. I froze. Every muscle in my body clenched. I looked behind me. Nothing. Just dark. I don't know how I made it out. I don't remember running. But I remember the sound that followed me, a deep metallic groaning, like the tunnel itself was collapsing in slow motion. I got back to the car. Threw up in the gravel. Drove home on autopilot. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've stopped receiving messages. No more anonymous packages. No more mysterious drawings. Ellie hasn't turned up. Mason's still gone. But the dreams haven't stopped. And in the quietest hours of the night, I swear I can still hear that siren. Not from my head, but from somewhere deeper, like the town is calling out again. Not to be found, but to be remembered. After the tunnel, I took a long break from everything. Teaching, researching, even sleeping. I tried to shove it all into a box in the attic of my mind, the kind you tape shut and never open again. I told myself it was over. I'd walked into the dark, and walked back out. I should have left it at that. But some things won't stay buried. In early September, I got a call from a former colleague, Ms. Landers, a retired art teacher from my old school. She sounded nervous. I didn't know who else to call, she said. You're the only one who might understand. Understand what? I asked. A student of mine, she's been drawing these cities, she whispered. I'd say towns, but they're too complex. There's something off about them. They feel like blueprints. My stomach clenched. Does she ever mention a place called Rhyhurst? I asked quietly. Silence. Then, yes, that's one of the names. How did you? I asked to meet the girl. Landers was hesitant. She's quiet, withdrawn. She doesn't talk much in class. But she leaves these drawings behind, in the trash, under her desk, like she's trying to get rid of them. I drove to the school that weekend and met with her in the art room. Her name was Naomi, 9 years old, soft voice, bright eyes, but dimmed somehow, like she carried more weight than a child should. I didn't press her, just asked if she liked to draw. She nodded. I don't like what I draw, though. Why not? Because I only remember it when I'm asleep. And when I wake up, it's still there. What is? She looked at me with this expression that still keeps me up at night. The smell, the smoke, the siren, that word again. I asked her if I could see one of her drawings. She hesitated, then pulled out a rolled-up page from her backpack. She said she didn't want to look at it anymore. It was almost too familiar. A curved tunnel, 3 turns. On the third one, this time, she'd drawn a door. A metal hatch, rusted and bolted shut. Underneath it she'd written, "Do not open. They're still inside." I asked her what that meant. She didn't answer, but she whispered something. I had to lean in close to hear it. She said, "One of them got out." That night, I pulled out Mason's last sketchbook again. The one I kept hidden in my office drawer. There were only 2 pages, but I'd missed something the first time. The second page, the one with the note, had faint pencil marks in the bottom corner. Barely visible, like he'd started a 3rd page and erased it. But the indentations remained. I shaded over them lightly with graphite. Slowly, a word began to appear. Run. Then I saw the drawing he'd started, the edge of something circular. A hatch. Same as Naomi's. The realization hit me so hard I nearly dropped the page. These kids, they weren't imagining things. They weren't drawing from fantasy or trauma. They were reporting, mapping, recording. It was like their memories overlapped across generations. What if Rhyhurst isn't a place, exactly? What if it's a memory that echoes? A structure, a cycle, a scar in whatever collective consciousness binds us together. But if that's true, if these children are remembering something that's been buried for decades, then something's wrong. Because the drawings are changing. The doors are appearing. And if Naomi's right, if something got out, then this isn't just a memory anymore. It's something waking up, and we're the ones remembering too late. 2 weeks after I met Naomi, the fire alarms went off during 3rd period. At first, we all assumed it was a drill. The school runs them randomly a few times a year. But then I noticed something odd, no announcement beforehand, no intercom message, just the alarms blaring suddenly, violently, louder than I ever remembered. And they didn't stop. After 10 minutes, kids were covering their ears, some crying. The vice principal ran down the hallway with a walkie-talkie, white in the face. I caught a piece of what she was shouting. No one pulled it. Main board's locked. We're trying to override. Eventually, the janitor cut the circuit manually. The building fell into eerie silence. They sent the students home early. Staff stayed behind. That's when I found it. Near the back stairwell, the one that leads to the old boiler room no one uses anymore, I saw a set of fresh scuff marks on the floor. Like something heavy had been dragged. I followed the marks to the maintenance closet. Inside, behind the mops and old paint cans, was a drawing. Taped to the inside of the door. It was Naomi's work. I recognized her pencil style, quick, deliberate. In the middle was the fire alarm bell, except she'd drawn it melting. Below it, stick-figure children were covering their ears. Some had X's for eyes. Above the drawing she'd scrawled, "They're learning to mimic the sound." I took it home. That night, I dreamed again. But it was different. I wasn't in the tunnel this time. I was above it, walking down a familiar street, only something was wrong. The sky was yellow. The buildings leaned inwards. All the windows were dark. I recognized one of the buildings, the Hollow House. The same warped porch, same second-story crack. In the dream, the door was open. Something was standing inside, not visible, just present. It watched me without eyes. When I woke up, my ears were ringing. I was sweating through the sheets. And on my nightstand, my alarm clock was blinking 8:08 over and over, a timestamp that had shown up in Mason's report years ago. August 8, 1965. The original evacuation. I didn't go to school the next day. I couldn't. Instead, I drove. I went back to the tunnel. I told myself I was just checking. That I'd drive by, make sure it was still sealed. That I'd see the gate locked again and feel closure. But the gate wasn't there anymore. It was gone, ripped clean off. The fence around the path had been trampled, not like by hikers or animals, but as if something massive had surged outward from within. I didn't go further. I couldn't, but I stood at the edge of that path and felt something in the air, a humming, low and almost subsonic, like the land itself was vibrating just enough to notice. Something was moving beneath. When I got home, I pulled out every drawing I had left, Mason's, Ellie's, Naomi's. I arranged them on the floor. Tried to overlay them, match landmarks, see what they were trying to tell me. And then I saw it. Every map, every layout, had been subtly shifting over time. The streets weren't static. The buildings weren't stationary. They were converging. Every iteration of the town was folding inward, like some architectural spiral. Roads that had once been wide open now curved inward like a maze. All of them led to the same place. A structure in the center. Square, featureless, just one label beneath it. The core. It had never been on Mason's earliest drawings. But it was on Naomi's. And Ellie's. The newer the memory, the more prominent the core became. I realized I'd seen it too. In the dream. That moment when I stood at the center of that dead street and looked through the doorway of the Hollow House, the presence I felt. It wasn't the house. It was something deeper. Something older than the house. Older than the tunnel. Maybe even older than the town itself. And now it had a name. Not spoken. Just known. I can't explain how I knew it. But I did. We all did. Those kids weren't remembering a place. They were remembering an awakening. And it was happening again. Right beneath us. After that night, something shifted. I started hearing the siren when it wasn't there. Not loud. Not the full scream like in the tunnel. Just this low, far-off hum that floated into my ears when the world got too quiet. It came when I was alone. In the staff lounge. In the shower. Lying in bed at 3:11 a.m., staring at the ceiling with dry, red eyes. At first, I thought it was stress. Or tinnitus. I even saw an audiologist. They found nothing. "You're perfectly healthy," she said, flipping her clipboard. "Maybe try cutting back on caffeine?" But I wasn't imagining it. I started tracking when I heard it. Logging time, environment, sensations. And there was a pattern, always around 3:30 in the morning. Always when I was facing north. Always when I was thinking about them. The kids. It felt like some part of Rhyhurst was following me back. The drawings didn't stop either. New ones started showing up, not from students I recognized, but from others. Kids in different schools. Emails from former colleagues. One teacher in Vermont said a 5th grader had scribbled the words, "The tunnel breathes now," on the corner of his test paper. Another said her student's art project had included a broken clock tower labeled "Central Time Reset Begins Here." It was spreading. Or maybe it always had been. I was just finally seeing the scope. One night, I went to a support group. Not for mental health, nothing formal like that. Just a community group for teachers who'd experienced disturbing content from students. I didn't expect much, but halfway through, a man named Gregory, retired science teacher, told a story that made the hair on my arms stand up. He said a student of his in 1999 used to build model cities out of cardboard. Meticulously planned, labeled, a different name back then, not Rhyhurst, but still eerily similar. Grid Streets. Central Chamber. One night, the kid stayed late for a science fair setup and never came home. The only thing left on the table was a note. "It's almost full now. I had to go before it closes." They found nothing. No signs of foul play. Just a miniature replica of a town that didn't exist. I asked Gregory if he remembered any building names. He shook his head, then said, "Wait, something about a core? Or a center?" It gave me a weird feeling. That was when I knew. It wasn't a new phenomenon. This thing, whatever it was, had been surfacing for decades, maybe longer. Through drawings, models, dreams, memories that didn't belong to any one person. The next day, I went to the library. Not the public one. I'd already combed through every archive in the region. I went to the university in town. Their restricted collection. I told the student clerk I was researching abandoned municipalities for a writing project. He didn't ask questions. I found 3 entries that chilled me. Entry 1, 1958, Hampner County petitioned to seal Rye District 4 due to unexplained sinkholes and resonant subterranean vibrations. Entry 2, 1965, evacuation orders issued for Sector Ryehurst, with 42 residents unaccounted for following a failed siren drill. Entry 3, 1972, Massachusetts Geological Survey requested closed investigation into non-natural tunnel formations discovered beneath condemned site R112. No follow-ups, no public releases, just paper trails with blacked-out names and dates that ended in silence. I photocopied everything. That night, I laid it all out in my living room. Dozens of pages, drawings, transcripts, photos, handwritten notes, tape recordings. I didn't sleep. I stared at it until dawn. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. In Naomi's last drawing, the one she gave me without a word, the core wasn't alone anymore. There were figures around it. Thin, faceless, 5 of them, arms raised, and a circle on the ground. No label this time, but in the corner, barely visible, she'd written. It opens at 7, no date, just a time, 7, that was 2 days ago. And I haven't stopped hearing the siren since. I haven't gone back to school since the night of October 7th. I never officially quit, I just stopped showing up. At first, they called. Left voicemails. The kind people leave when they're not sure if something's wrong but are too polite to ask. Then they stopped. That's the thing about teachers, we're easy to replace. I moved, didn't tell anyone, left town with a backpack, a stack of copies, and 1 battered sketchbook. Rented a 1-bedroom place up north under a different name. I told myself it was temporary. That I just needed time to clear my head. But deep down, I knew I wasn't coming back. I started writing everything down. That's what you're reading now. I don't care if you believe me. Honestly, I hope you don't. I hope you roll your eyes, close the tab, and go back to your life. Because if even a fraction of this sounds familiar to you, if you've ever dreamed of tunnels, or heard a siren in the distance when no one else did, you should stop reading. Right now, because after that night, I learned something no one else had told me. The drawings? They're not warnings, they're invitations. Here's what happened. October 7th, 7:00 p.m. The time Naomi wrote. I should have ignored it, should have thrown the paper away. Instead, I stood in the woods again. Same gravel road, same dead trees, same cold in my chest like something inside me already knew. There was no gate this time. Just an open mouth. I walked in. No flashlight, no recorder. I didn't need them anymore. The tunnel was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. The way a church feels when no one's inside, but you still whisper. I took the second turn. Then the third. The walls started to change. Not in shape, in texture. Smooth, almost polished, like something had passed through recently. The air smelled like ash and wet stone. And then I saw it. The hatch. Not drawn, not imagined, real, 7 feet tall, circular, rusted, open. Inside was a staircase. Worn, spiraling downward. I didn't think. I descended. The sounds changed. No more tunnel acoustics. It was like walking into a vacuum. The only noise was my own breath. Then the staircase ended, and I was inside. I don't know how to describe the room. It wasn't big, not what I expected. 10 feet across, maybe 12. Stone walls, smooth floor, but in the center, inlaid into the ground, was the pattern I'd seen before. The circle, and 5 figures, not real ones, shadows, impressions burned into the floor like heat stains, human-shaped, arms raised toward the ceiling. And behind them, in the wall, another drawing. No, not a drawing. A carving. It was the town, Ryehurst, but not how the kids had drawn it. This was older, cruder, like someone had etched it centuries ago. It only had 3 labels. The gate, the sound, the memory. Then, under those, you are now part of it. That's when I heard it. Not a siren this time. A voice. Not outside my head, inside it. Soft, gentle, like a teacher reading a bedtime story. Only 3 words. We remember you. And then I was gone. I don't mean unconscious. I mean gone. Time didn't move, or it moved too fast. I remember my knees hitting the ground. I remember the smell of burning wood. I remember a flash of light that didn't hurt my eyes. Then I was back on the forest floor, hours later, covered in mud and scratches like I'd clawed my way out of the earth itself. My car was still there. Keys still in my pocket. I drove until the sun came up. I haven't been back. I haven't dreamed since then, either. Not once. The drawings have stopped. The sirens, too. But sometimes, not often, just sometimes, I wake up and find dirt under my fingernails. A smell on my clothes like smoke. And a whisper in my ear that fades before I can catch it. It always feels like I've been somewhere. Somewhere underneath. Somewhere I'm not supposed to remember. But I do. We all do, eventually. You don't find Rhyhurst. It finds you. And once you've seen it, it starts drawing you back. So if you ever find a sketchbook that doesn't belong to anyone, if your kid draws a map you don't recognize, if you hear a siren in the night when no one else does, lock your doors. And whatever you do, don't take the third turn.